Hello, hello. This is Christina Barney. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barn. Today we're going to be talking about this Washington Post reporter who's supposed to be fact checking and Phillip Bump. And he did an article about Sean Hannity talking about the Hunter Biden laptop and just trying to dismiss Hannity, who had this angle of, oh, this stuff came out in the trial and it's real, been real the whole time. And the media, they tried to silence it. And Bump is finding a way to kind of, skirt around all that. So I think it's a bit of a hacky piece from him. And I'm going to play a clip. If you don't know who Phillip Bump is, you probably might know who Phillip Bump is after I show you this clip. It might be familiar to you. But we'll talk about that. Also, I saw an interview with Julian Michaels talking about why she left California and how crazy it had gotten. So I thought it was interesting, and she said a lot of things that were true. Some things I still found to be strange that I will point out when we watch the video together. But I guess a big thing I want to say is if you leave your crazy state, please leave the crazy there and adapt to the not crazy people. Leave that behind. You may not be as crazy as they were in California anymore, but that doesn't mean your brand of liberal ideas needs to come over and moderate the red states, the conservative states that you think are a great place to live. That's why you packed up and moved. So I don't know what all of her policy positions, are or whatever, but she said she was on the left and they kind of switched up. So anyway, I will be talking about that and some other things as well. But before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the website because it does cost to stream and run my site and all that good stuff. So you guys can support. I do appreciate it. You guys can give on Facebook stars, and if you're on YouTube, you guys can do super chats. And if you guys want to check out any of my books, there's a link in the descriptions that will take you to my Amazon page where you guys can learn more about that stuff. These lights have me looking really flushed out, but I don't know what to do about it. But yeah, but you guys can check out some of my books. One of my books is, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion, covers rights, theology, of course, theology, but also some philosophy and politics, and really tackles a ton of different issues. And people will ask, well, why tackle that subject from a theological perspective? Why not just keep it, talking about the science and the rights and so on? People bring it up all the time anyway. You might as well know how to defend your faith and defend your positions. And there's a lot of different things that people mention that I debunk in there. So if you don't talk about it, someone else will give you false information, and then Christians don't know how to defend their faith or whatever. So it's just good to talk about. And it talks about, even if you don't believe in God, there's still principles that carry over to non-religious people that are good, and prove that it's in people's best interest to act as though life is inherently valuable and that human beings are inherently valuable. Maybe you can't come to the terms that we're all made in the image of God and that's why we're valuable, but to just at least pretend like that's your worldview. So I make that case too. So it's a good book if you haven't checked it out. So I am in the brighter Michigan studio today, so I'm thankful to be here today. So I haven't been here in a minute. I wonder if there's a comment about that. Oh, yep, in the studio today. Yep. Kit Kat loves the background. Yep, I am behind a green screen. So that's the backdrop that I have on there. So the only thing is I don't know how to, these lights are a little flush, obviously, but I'm glad to be in the studio. It's a good space, and it was always good to me when I came. So it's nice to be here. Anyway, let's hop to it. There was something I wanted to show you guys yesterday, but I ran out of time. There were so many funny things to show you guys yesterday. And the other day, Gretchen Whitmer, who is trying to get Biden reelected, she was asked about Hunter Biden, and at that moment of all moments, that is when she lost power or couldn't hear them anymore. And to me, it looks like a fake out. It looks like she didn't want to answer a question, so they just started playing dumb. It's possible that's not the case. There's always a chance. You guys can let me know what you think when you see this video. But I think her staff and Gretchen Whitmer are probably playing us, and they probably could hear just fine and opted just to not answer this question.
I want to turn to a different, very different trial, and that is one that is going on in Delaware with the president's son, Hunter Biden. He is on trial for obtaining and possessing a firearm while under the influence of illegal drugs, which was against the law. Republican Lindsey Graham says that an average American would not have been prosecuted
Dana, are you there?
for this. Yes, Governor, can you hear me? Okay, it sounds like the governor can't hear me. You know what? We're going to take a very quick commercial break and
Yeah, sure.
get this fixed, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere.
It just looks, maybe it's a little convenient. Is all I'm saying. All people, are mentioning, but the timing seemed a little suspect. But anyway, it's a little funny. It's a little funny. Speaking of funny, some time ago, this was last September. Actually, I don't know if this was last September, but this is sometime last year. And I showed you guys this clip of Phillip Bump when this interview went down, but he was doing a debate about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and Biden's business dealings. And it was a long conversation, so he was ready to go by the time this came up. I did watch the whole interview. I don't think he looked great in it altogether, but this ending is what went super viral with Phillip Bump here. So he is a reporter for the Washington Post. He does fact checks and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to look at an article that he put together trying to debunk Sean Hannity, but I just needed to make you guys familiar with who this man is.
What do you take from the text message to his adult daughter, Hunter's text message? I have to give 50% of my income to Pop.
I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what that means.
Well, it's
I know it's circumstantial evidence, and you prefer that.
No, what could it mean?
I have no idea.
But
I don't know.
Well,
I appreciate your.
Has anybody asked her?
I don't know. I don't know.
Don't you think somebody should ask her?
Okay. Like I'm not. I just said I don't know, and I don't know what to make of it, so I have nothing else to say about it.
Yeah,
what
but
do you want me to say?
Yeah, but you say there's no evidence, but then there's a text message where he says, "I give Pop 50% of my money." That's evidence.
Okay. Well, okay, fine.
So
it's evidence. I appreciate you having me on.
It doesn't. That something like that. Who do you think is being more? I listen to that and I'm saying,
Am I?
You can free to go.
I feel you want me to leave, like just walk out in the middle of this, because that way you can
you can go.
Right.
Is this a standard? Really, this is the way the Washington Post handles people who disagree with them.
When I agree to be on for 45 minutes,
go,
and then
go.
I get on for an hour and 15. Yeah, then after a while I go. Thanks for having me. Come on.
So FY, yeah, he was on there for a while. So but to leave and just kind of be so flippant about the text message, how is that not evidence? And he was like, fine, it's okay. And did someone ask her about it? I don't know. Aren't you the media? Maybe this is a question that you should ask. Get to the bottom of it. Seems kind of important. especially when people are saying, there's no connection there. Oh, Biden's not involved, and oh, et cetera, et cetera. There's no ties. And there's this text message that exists. There's also text messages or like WhatsApp from Hunter, threatening businessmen, saying, my dad's right next to me. And there's evidence that puts them like in the neighborhood of each other during that time. That was from the laptop, by the way. um, and I wrote about that on my website, blacktnews.com, that there is evidence that ties Biden to Hunter's business dealings. There absolutely is. And whether people think it's enough to be like, oh, this is a criminal empire, we got Joe. I don't think there's a snowball's chance in heck that you're gonna see Biden prosecuted and go away in handcuffs, anything to that degree. Okay, I don't think it's gonna happen. I think the best justice that you could probably get is him not winning his second term. And that's probably all we're going to get. That was all that we got with Hillary. They don't want to prosecute an old fool because the jury would apparently feel very sorry for him anyway. But the thing about Joe Biden is that he was originally saying he doesn't know anything about his son's business dealings. He doesn't even ask him about it, which people even thought was strange because they said, well, why wouldn't you at least ask about his business dealings to at least make sure that you're not somehow overlapping when you're riding on Air Force Two with him or something to go do business deals and whatnot, just to make sure that you don't accidentally end up doing something inappropriate or make it look like something inappropriate is going on. So people didn't buy the whole idea of him not asking his son any questions or knowing anything about his business dealings. And then there was evidence like that text message that acknowledged that Biden is cashing in somehow with his son, or that there's some kind of sphere of influence where they're meeting people, arranging people, getting things done for his son. So, the Republicans have come out with different evidence that the Washington Post apparently just kind of wants to ignore, but whatever. Today we're going to be talking about this laptop situation and this article that Mr. Bump wrote trying to come for Sean Hannity. You guys can be the judge of how silly that you think it is, and I'll let you know certainly what I think about this article. Let me bump it up a little bit. I can read it, but why strain my eyes? The right takes a Biden laptop victory lap around an empty arena. The issue was always whether the material was part of a foreign effort to influence the election, as had occurred 4 years before. Ooh, okay. Sean Hannity began his Fox News show Tuesday by demanding that his audience understand the real point of significance from the trial that led to felony convictions for President Biden's son, Hunter. It wasn't that Hunter Biden was facing accountability. It was that he and his allies in the right-wing media had been right all along about a laptop that once belonged to Hunter Biden. The critical development from this trial is one huge single piece of evidence entered into the official record by your U.S. government, Hannity said, and that's Hunter Biden's very real laptop. Not only did the U.S. federal government confirm that Hunter's laptop is real, they confirmed that its contents are real, and the contents have not been tampered with by anybody. And so there was a question about like the tampering of the laptop, and they said, no. In other words, he continued, you were lied to on a very high level just before an election by numerous people and entire institutions. And that's just true, by the way. Hannity's argument is that opponents of Donald Trump circled the wagons in October 2020 to falsely attack a report from the New York Post that centered on material taken from Hunter Biden's laptop. A letter from a number of former intelligence officials called it Russian disinformation in the phrasing of Hannity's guest commentator Jonathan Turley. Social media companies opted to limit the spread of the story after it was published. All of this in Hannity's presentation has been shown to not only erroneous, but a function of lies from people who wanted Joe Biden to win by any means necessary. How is this not true? How is this not true? What's strange about this phrasing here, they mentioned they in the letter they called it Russian disinformation in the phrasing of Hannity's guest commentator Jonathan Turley. Isn't that the purpose of the letter, to say like, hey, this looks like Russian disinformation, which we'll get to that later. And they say that they don't have evidence that it's not Russian, that it is Russian disinformation. But the purpose of the letter was to make it look like Russian disinformation. And so the crazy thing about this is that, yes, there was a laptop that the New York Post had, that the person who had the laptop, because Hunter Biden left it at a repair shop, and he saw some disturbing things on it. He sent it to the FBI, and I guess he expected the FBI to do something about it. They didn't, apparently. I mean, they investigated and so on, but he didn't hear anything. Elections coming up or whatever. He contacted Giuliani, and he sent a copy off to like the New York Post. And the New York Post started reporting things. New York Post, their account is locked out on Twitter. You can't share the articles about the laptop. NPR is like, nobody cares about this. That's why we're ignoring this. Why? That's why we're not reporting, because nobody cares about this stuff. People are calling it disinformation, and they use this letter from the intelligence people to discredit it. That was the point of it. So just own up to that. And he's going to go on and basically justify their opinion of that as if they did the right thing. James Clapper was asked, does he regret signing the letter? He said no. And the reason why he probably doesn't regret signing the letter is because at the end of the day, Trump isn't president and Joe Biden is. And they didn't want Trump to be president. It's not hard. They didn't want the laptop to be true. And there was outlets that didn't have the laptop, sure, or a copy of the drive, but they also didn't want it. I repeatedly saw Jack Posobiec tweeting at reporters, I have a copy. I have a copy of the drive. Would you like a copy of the drive? I can send you a copy of the drive. Jake Tapper, do you want a copy of the drive? Constantly. They could have had their forensic people look it up, but there were things that were coming out in real time about the laptop that people were confirming. Like there was an email between Hunter and Frank Lutz, who is he does a lot of what do you call it when you have different voters and you're like asking them questions about a speech or whatever. He does that kind of stuff. You maybe seen him around. So he had an email correspondence, and someone was like, oh, trying to make it seem like Frank was a bad guy because he had, he emailed Hunter, and he responded to the little controversy. And I'm like, did he just confirm that there's things in here that are true and real? Didn't he just do that? So just take the L. Just admit that you guys were not being honest, that you didn't want to know the truth, and it was easier to believe the lie, the cover-up. And it was a cover-up. It was a cover-up that was allegedly arranged by Blinken, who was, associated with the Biden campaign, who's now with the Biden administration. Did any of these intelligence people who were saying, well, we don't have evidence that it's Russian disinformation, but it looks like it, did they just ask the president whether or not it was true? Because the FBI had the laptop. So they could have very easily said, yeah, it's true, and not put out that letter. But the purpose of the letter was to deceive the American people. And it's not hard to acknowledge that. It's not hard. I know Hannity is like so on the right, and there's some, I could say, some hacky kind of things that happen with Sean sometimes. I'm like, Sean, really? Sean? I used to watch him a lot, but I was like, eventually I guess kind of grew out of it a bit, but I still like Sean. But he's not wrong, and people aren't wrong by pointing out that there was a conspiracy and people weren't doing it for the best of intentions or for the, good of the people to be knowledgeable about the affairs of the world. To them it was the best of intentions because they didn't want Trump to be president. Just take the L. You could just, this article should have been, yeah, we were wrong and we're sorry. We'll do better. That's what this article could be. That's what it could be. Anyway, there are at least two significant errors in Hannity's presentation. One is that he is conflating the laptop presented as evidence at the trial, the one obtained by the FBI in 2019, with the laptop 2019. They had the laptop in 2019 with a laptop that was a source of the New York Post story. The FBI was already investigating Hunter Biden when he dropped off his laptop for repairs in April 2019. Eventually, the Bureau had learned about an abandoned device and took possession of it along with a hard drive that contained some material recovered from the device. At another point, the FBI obtained material stored by Apple, the contents of Hunter Biden's iCloud account. The material included photos, messages, and emails, which, by the way, there was different stuff that was coming out online that was from his account in iCloud and other stuff too. What the New York Post got was apparently a copy of that hard drive made by the owner of the repair shop, John Paul Mac Isaac. He tipped off the FBI about the device, and the 2020 election neared without word of any federal investigation. Also contacted Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Giuliani was the conduit to the New York Post after pitching it to Fox News, which passed. Other news outlets were not given access to the material at the time of the initial report. Giuliani told the New York Times he was worried its journalists would spend all the time they could to try to contradict it before they put it out, which, wasn't probably a bad call. When the Washington Post finally got access to the material in 2022, we were able to verify some of it as authentic. There was also evidence, though, that the material on the hard drive that went from Giuliani to the New York Post was moved around with some information added. Even Mac Isaac warned that material being attributed to the laptop was not on the laptop when he undertook the file recovery process. At trial, government witnesses confirmed that what they had was the original laptop and material from Hunter Biden's iCloud account, but that was only one fork of the flow of the information to the public. The other was the copy that ended up with Giuliani and in the press. There may have been another earlier fork too. Time magazine reported soon after the initial New York Post story that the material attributed to Hunter Biden was being offered to Ukraine in 2019, perhaps after his Apple account had been illegally accessed. Well, he did a lot of work in Ukraine, so, I guess it makes sense somebody would want it. This overlaps with the other error in Hannity's argument. The issue is that at the time the New York Post report was in part that the material might not be authentic. In part, though, it was authentic and being released in October 2020 as part of a foreign effort to influence the outcome of the presidential race. So the government gave Facebook an FYI of hey, there could be some misinformation. Just have an eye open for that. So when the laptop story dropped, they assumed it was that, what they wanted to kind of have blocked. Again, they have information that they could verify themselves to all this being true, which I didn't expect them to. They're doing investigations. They're not going to talk about what is or isn't, but to put it out there with the hopes that this stuff would be blocked and suppressed so Hunter could come in there, that's just kind of seems like what happened, guys. That's what seems to have happened. But the Twitter blocking, I think their excuse was it was hacked materials. if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it was just misinformation. I think they said it was like hacked materials, and it wasn't hacked materials. It was his laptop that he left, and therefore the laptop became the property of the man he left it with. So, anyway, after all Russian actors had done precisely this 4 years prior, in 2016, hackers linked to Russia assessed a Democratic Party network and the email account of senior staff for Hillary Clinton's campaign. Much of that material was then given to WikiLeaks, which released it in bunches during July and October of that year. Okay, but what was I mean, I was reading some of them emails. What was false about the emails? Not saying hacked things are good, but this again, the laptop wasn't hacked. It wasn't hacked materials, and it was true. The second bat, I mean, did the WikiLeaks, when they had, different photos of media people having dinner with Hillary people and being all so chummy and all that, was that fake? Was it, the different coordination with, Hillary's team versus the media and saying like, oh, this is the headline we would like, for this story? Was that, Russian plotting, or was that just they hacked your emails and everybody can see your business, you know? So I don't see how this justifies the behavior with the laptop. I just don't see it. Somebody can help me out. Let me know. The second batch material began being released on the same day that the intelligence community raised a public alarm about Russian interference efforts. It was a use of legitimate material obtained illegally to try to influence how Americans viewed the election. The federal government at the time, led by President Trump, worked with, that's true. It didn't happen under his watch, there's usurpers there, man. Worked with social media companies in an effort to introduce guardrails against a similar effort in 2020. There were already signs that Russia was again hoping to aid Trump's election. Then the New York Post story dropped. The letter from the 51 intelligence officials was an early articulation of the concern that history was repeating itself, but it was also more cautious than many, including Turley, suggest. We want to emphasize that we do not know if the emails provided to the New York Post by President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, are genuine or not, it read, and that we do not have evidence of Russian involvement, just that our experience makes us deeply suspicious that the Russian government played a significant role in this case. So we have no evidence. Okay? But, our experience just, we got a hunch. We just got a hunch. So they covered their butt by saying we don't have any evidence. We can't say it's true or not. But we think it's fake. That's our instinct. And they use this level of authority because they are all these intelligence officials. And Joe Biden got to go on the debate stage and tell the American people, hey, all these intelligence agencies, when Trump brought it up, the laptop from hell is what he calls it. When he got to talk about it, Biden got to dismiss it and say all these intelligence people say this looks like Russian disinformation. So this laptop that I'm sure he knew was real, and well, I could always be wrong. So let's say just like 95% certain that there was probably conversation somewhere between Joe, and his son about this when this stuff started dropping, and there's images of Hunter doing things to Squirtle. No, I don't think he was doing things to Squirtle. Doing things that Squirtle should not have seen, and just a bunch of other stuff coming out that I just believe that there was probably some conversation had, right? He must have been aware that the laptop was real. And yet, he blamed it on a foreign adversary with nuclear weapons and said they're trying to screw with our election. And it was so irresponsible. And it's disrespectful to the voters. I know politicians lie. I don't like lying. And I feel like it is a major sign of disrespect. Joe Biden's lies are super heinous, man. And he'll lie all the time. But this was a pretty egregious lie that I don't think people weigh the gravity of how significant something like that is. Knowing that the laptop had to be real and that the letter they had arranged to cover his butt. If the laptop wasn't that big of a deal, why the heck would they go through all this? Julia, and you know what? There's really I don't see any major scolding. He mentions that Biden, but where's the scolding? You can do this article on Hannity, but you're not gonna come for how awful Biden was to do what he did. Giuliani, you may recall, had spent significant time in Europe several months prior, attempting to find evidence of impropriety by Biden's family that included interaction with some added to a sanction list in September 2020 as a Russian intelligence agent. Others went further in linking the New York Post story to Russia, including Biden, but it is not as though there was no precedent for such concerns in that moment. And that's all he said in this article about Biden, including Biden. These two factors, that the New York Post laptop and the trial laptop were different, and that the concern was less than authenticity than sourcing, help explain why the testimony at the trial didn't make the splash that Hannity seems to have hoped, and that media outlets such as the Washington Post had validated some of the material, and it was already understood that the government considered its laptop as legitimate. After Hannity lamented the media's silence on the so-called critical development, Turley's offered a theory of why the silence had ensued. If the laptop is authentic, if those files are real, he said, then you have these detailed accounts of a multi-million-dollar influence peddling operation run by the Biden family. Those would also be authentic, but the media just simply doesn't want to go there. Except we already know that many of those files were real because we got access to them and verified them. The reason the media doesn't want to go there on breathless claims about a Biden family influence peddling operation is that the material doesn't prove any such operation. It shows, and has by now been exhaustively explained, work done by Hunter Biden and his uncle James that involved lots of money, but did not demonstrably involve President Biden. The entire point of the House Republican impeachment effort has been to prove Joe Biden's involvement. They have been unable to do so, and that's garbage. That's garbage. Do I think they're gonna nail him and have him arrested or something? No. But this is just willful. I don't know. I don't know if willful ignorance is a good term. Maybe he's just lying. Well, I don't know about the text messages between his Hunter saying that he gives half his money to his dad, Hunter threatening people with his dad right by him. And Biden kept saying, I have had no involvement. I know nothing about it. Then it was like, I have no involvement with it. And then it's like, I've never been in business with my son. And it just kept shifting and shifting as more evidence started to come out. Far cry from his original claim. Don't even if he didn't like just give all the money to Joe, which there was different evidence in the laptop that their finances have intermingled, by the way, but him doing things and paying for things that maybe would have transferred to family members or Joe or something in some kind of way, just even if there's no check that Hunter wrote out to his dad, there are other ways that people paying for stuff can still be a benefit to you, right? But we know that Hunter has said things like have my money goes to Pop and etc. So I don't you're just doing too much, man. We should not necessarily assume that Sean Hannity or his guests are being sincere in their lamentations about the failures of the media. It is politically useful for the right and for Trump to suggest that the Hunter Biden trial revealed something novel and incriminating about the traditional media. It didn't. But readers of this article probably don't need to be convinced of that, and Hannity's viewers probably aren't reading this, so why not say it? So, yeah, people's opinions of this can get really political, obviously. And there's political reasons why folks do what they do, including Mr. Phillip Bump. And I don't know. There's some really smart people out there who do blind themselves, and they just have like Trump derangement syndrome or whatever. They've just convinced themselves that Trump is so bad and whatnot. Some people, it's the ends justify the means. Like Sam Harris was on, I can't remember the podcast, Trigonometry, and they were talking about the Hunter Biden laptop conspiracy with the being censored online, and he admitted it was a conspiracy, and basically he was okay that the government worked to suppress information from the public because at the end of the day he wanted Joe Biden to be president rather than Donald Trump. And he said he wouldn't have cared if there were corpses of children on Hunter's laptop. It still, wouldn't have been worse than, I guess, Trump being president. And, you know, um, and there's nothing that could have been discovered that's worse than even, he said, Trump University. And, Sam Harris, a lot of people think he's this really smart guy. But you see how his Trump derangement syndrome twisted his brain to that point. So maybe it has done the same to members of the media, many members of the media. But another, thing that could be going on is that people realize politics is a game and you don't necessarily need to be honest if you can't advance your agenda, and it maybe just needs to feel honest instead of like being honest, instead of being the truth, as long as it feels good, right? Right. So anyway, let's move on. I want to play a bit of this interview with Julian Michaels, and she talked about why she left um California. I want to address this comment that my sister said, "Can you imagine if all this was Don Jr.?" That's the craziest thing, though. People pretending that the laptop wasn't a big deal. Everyone knows that if Hunter Biden was switched and it was Don Jr., it would be just news coverage after coverage. People would be doing every kind of detail of the laptop. No one would have been like, "Oh, that's Russian disinformation." You know, people would have skewered him and Trump. The media would have been like nonstop. So people pretending like it's not an interesting story, it's not a relevant story, that there's not information in there that's interesting. These people who wrote articles about, is Donald Trump afraid of stairs? And that did he feed the koi fish wrong? Did he walk in front of the queen? Just did he put ketchup on his steak? He apparently maybe does, I guess. It's crazy. It's crazy. But anyway, let's move on. So Julian Michaels was on Sage Still's podcast, and I haven't watched the whole thing. And but I saw the snippet going around on TikTok. So I found it where it was here. I did watch a little bit before then. And she was talking about 30-day shred video that she did some years back, and she said it was like the most sold um athletic video like ever, like for workouts. And they said more than like, I guess Tybo and all the other stuff, Richard, the guy with the gay guy with the curly hair. Like she said it was more than anything. I thought it was interesting because I definitely had that tape myself. And you're like, why aren't you shredded? I used that at a time where I did lose a lot of weight. I still have it, so maybe I'll get back to it after I lose a little bit more weight. I'll keep going walking, and maybe I'll go back to the crazy video because it is a crazy video. Um it takes a while to do those lateral burpees and other stuff. So Julian Michaels was, a lot of people know her from The Biggest Loser. She was the mean one, I guess. And there's Bob, and then there's Julian, and then there's other people throughout the years. But I just kind of, I guess, watched the first couple seasons of Biggest Loser. And but yeah, I've done some of her videos, but she's a huge figure in the athletic athletic market. And so I don't know how left wing Julian Michaels is, but apparently, she's liberal and has lived in California, and she no longer wanted to be there, and she no longer is there. So we shall talk about this section of the interview.
Time. Guess what we're gonna do? Stop. You have no choice. You have to hang out with
I
me.
love it.
I don't have that many friends there, so will you be my Florida
I
friend?
absolutely will.
Okay.
Yeah, California got too crazy for me.
Why?
Okay, this is my parting line. I grew up here. I'm a woman. I'm a gay woman. My mom's a Jew. My dad's an Arab. I have a black kid. And believe it or not, my son is half Latin, even though he doesn't look like it. I hold a million cards in your game of woke victimology poker. And when I leave California, maybe you've lost your fucking mind. Just maybe. Like when you when you have me running from home, maybe it's gone way too far.
What was the line? Like what was it?
My God,
I guess
girl,
the
there's
end for you?
not enough time. And I actually take this line from Bill and Elon Musk, and they're like, I actually haven't changed.
Yes.
The world around me is shifting, and I haven't moved. So some of these laws that are passing here.
So she's going to get into some of the laws that are crazy and the things that she says are true. And there's even worse things that she doesn't mention, but it's pretty bad. California is terrible. You see, all kinds of different people moving out. Anna Kasparian, talks about how bad California is and their dumb laws and other stuff and crime and stuff that they're doing with, housing. And it's just a mess. But this idea of I haven't changed, everyone else has lost their minds. And I wonder how much I'm glad that people acknowledge that. And so she's left California, now she's in Florida. And I would just hope that when people leave California or California, whatever you want to call it, when they leave places like that, that they don't bring their ideology with them to where they go. Because they're going to be voters in California, I mean, in Florida. So when something comes up on the ballot and maybe you aren't as left wing as California, but you're still on the left. And I don't know how much she's maybe culturally shifted on these issues, or if she has or hasn't. But she's saying she hasn't changed. Okay, she's on the left, but she's just not as crazy as how far they've gone. But some of these maybe are these ideologies that you have. Maybe people took them to further. Maybe they followed some of that stuff to their conclusion, and that's where they got radical, right? Too far. So I just don't want to lose the conservative majority or right leaning majority or whatever in some of these places that are open, that have opened up to you and are a haven, and then all of a sudden you make it moderate, and then all of a sudden you wake up again and you have to flee the state because you turned it into California. And maybe you're not as crazy as the folks who take it too far, but at what point do we kind of look at ourselves and say, how did this issue get so far? So a really easy example to use, and I don't know what her, I'm generalizing now because I don't really know her issue by issue for Julian Michaels, but abortion, for example. People say the left is really crazy with it, and it's not just, you know, we'll just say the abortion lobby is really crazy, and Democrats, because basically every mainstream Democrat is their position to basically have no restrictions. And people would say, well, no, what happened to safe, legal, and rare? This doesn't make any sense. Well, safe, legal, and rare actually didn't make any sense. One, it's not safe. You want it safe for the woman, but it's designed to not be safe for the baby, right? So it's not really supposed to be safe. But you want it legal so it can be safe for the woman. She doesn't have to do back alley abortions and all that other stuff. And you want her to have the right and capability to do it. But you said rare. Okay, but why rare? Rare because it's bad, because it is killing the baby, because it's not actually safe. There's all these contradictions here in that logic. So eventually people start moving to where it's an honest position that's actually consistent. So people taking it all the way to the end of women should be able to have an abortion up until the moment of birth, which they don't say that, but that's the case. You should be able to abort third trimester if you want to. And yeah, that happens on the rare side. Most people do it earlier. Which, by the way, they're all immoral to me. So, just using this as a talking point, you know, they'll say that's too far and that's too radical. But if you wanted it to be rare because you acknowledge it's a baby, and it's been that way since the moment of conception, why why are they so much more awful? Because they're saying no, it's in the woman's body. If she doesn't want to be a mother, she shouldn't have to. And consent has to be ongoing. So if at the very end she doesn't want to, that's up to her. It's in her body. That's the number one thing that's the most important. Her body, her choice. And it gets to override the baby because we're not going to consider it to be a person until it's out. That's their logic. Because you might say, well, no, why can't they just at that point not kill it if it can come out of the womb? It's still in the womb. Unless you're gonna really make it so that they can't do it at a certain amount of time, but they don't even really want to do that because they'll say, oh well, no one would really want to do it. It's just that's not true. So they're just following the logic all the way to the end. If it's my body, my choice, it's still in her body, so it's still her choice. And it's not even really about that. The my body, my choice is a cover. It's the excuse why they get away with it. But the reason why they want abortion to be legal is because they don't want to be a mom right then. They don't want to be the mother of that child. They don't want the baby to live. They might want another baby to live at some other point in time, but it's come at the wrong time financially. We got the wrong baby daddy. Whatever the reason is, this baby's disabled. This baby's got Down syndrome. I don't want this baby and I don't want it alive. And I'm being just blunt today, but that's what it is. And the excuse for why they can do that is because it's in their body. And there's people who are saying with the artificial wombs that they have to sort of prepare people's mindsets now, because if it gets to the point where they can say, well, you can just transfer, you don't have to kill the baby, you can transfer them into the artificial womb. They're saying, no, women need to have the opportunity to be free from biological parenthood. That's what it's actually about. So people say, well, they've gone too far on this. No, the root of this, they're just taking it to its logical conclusion. On the opposite side, people like Nikki Haley or whoever, different folks will say, the abolitionist position with the babies is wrong or whatever, or extreme and or silly or wrong. I don't know. They'll say it's ridiculous and not really explain why. But just taking that logic, if it is a life, which we all claim at conception, then no, there's no point where you should be able to kill that child. And if it is a child, just like a child outside of the womb is a child, then there should be equal justice for that child and for the person who commits the crime. That's just the logical conclusion. So people in the middle, fiddling around with their ideology and making the compromise, you can do that, but you also don't make sense. You also don't make sense. So people just need to think about what it is they actually believe and why it is that they believe that. And I know we live in a society, maybe you have to make compromises somewhere. But where's your logic taking you on some of this stuff? Because if you still at the root share the same sort of principles as the people who've gone too far, if you start clashing with the people who've made Florida great or whatever, and you start diluting it, those people will just maybe also follow you, or you'll make more people like them. And then the haven you sought after will be gone. Anyway, let's keep watching.
Are absolutely fucking mind-boggling in relation to crime, protecting our kids. Like, we're decriminalizing everything, which arguably I would probably be okay with, but we're not regulating any of it.
Right.
So it's like, okay, you're going to decriminalize sex work, but only so women can legally loiter on the streets. Like, not to keep them safe, not to have them pay taxes, not to make them, regularly check for STDs, not to take away the pimps out of the equation. It's the like, if you made that argument to me, I'd be like, well, yes, we want, of course. I mean, I could be liberal. I could go there with you. But I grew up this way. But when it's like, oh.
So does that make you feel like, oh yeah, we should just have all the sex work? I don't know about that, guys. Let's keep going.
And then what we're going to do is we're going to pass a law for LGBTQ rights so that 24-year-old men can sleep with 14-year-old boys and not have to register as a sex offender because it's just not fair to the gays. I'm like, what? It's what? Like, I don't know if you saw that one. That was like, I think early 2020 when they passed that law. And so I was like, if a 24-year-old man touches my 14-year-old son, I will get a gun and take matters into my own hands. Yeah.
By the way, Scott Wiener is, yes, his name's Wiener, who is behind that bill and other bills that are pretty heinous that come out of California. I saw some reports or whatever, people talking about him trying to seek some higher office. I do not want the man on a federal level at all. I mean, we got enough crazy people from California trying to influence the rest of the country, but that dude is straight up evil, is into some really wicked stuff. And it's an example, like, Scott Wiener complained about people with COVID and not following the different rules or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But when monkeypox was a thing and people were saying, hey, gay men, try not to have an orgy this weekend. He's like, how dare you try to curb the gays? Like, that's what they try to do with the AIDS epidemic. No, you just should make good medicine for us. Don't tell us not to have orgies, unlimited, like a buffet. Like, I'm like, bro, if monkeypox is going around, why can't you just pump the brakes on the sexual escapades, encourage people to make better decisions about their lives? In the meantime, at least, if you can bully people about COVID, why are you so offended about the monkeypox? And how dare you try to curb the gays? So that's one of the many crazy things about Scott.
Yes. Like, are you fucking kidding? Or the fact that a 12-year-old child can be put on off-label cancer drugs to irreparably change their body. Again, if my son came to me and said, Mom, my daughter, I think I'm trans, I'd say, okay, like, you want to dress this way? You want me to call you whatever the heck you want me to address? Fine. Explore it. I love you. I'm cool. Like, do you, as long as we're safe. But we're not changing your body until it's fully developed. I'm sorry. Conversation's over. Can't get a fucking tattoo.
Exactly.
Are you crazy? It's insane. Like,
Okay, so when I was watching this interview, or that section when I was watching on TikTok, that was a part where I was like, huh? And I know people say that, like, oh, if they decide that, fine, that's cool, whatever. They just have to wait till they're older. And I get it, because you don't want them to make that kind of permanent mistake on their bodies. But if your son came to you and said, hey, Mom, I'm actually your daughter, and I'm actually a woman, the response should be, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a woman? How you say you feel like that? Can you explain that? How can you justify that? What would be the answer besides like some stereotypes? And you can calmly tell your son not to belittle women to the point where they fit in such a tiny box that he feels that he can just encompass it or fit into it, that realm himself, just by his observations. And if there are things that he enjoys that are perceptively more feminine or whatever, you know, then that's cool with her. Why say, oh, if you're trans, cool, let's explore that? It's not true that he's a girl. It's just not the truth. And to go, she's big into athletics and stuff, and so I'm not really surprised that she's like, don't alter your body, and saying that they're off-label cancer drugs and fearing sterilization and all this stuff. I'm not surprised that she has that take at all. But the reason why people want to take those puberty blockers is because they want to live as convincingly as the gender that they believe that they are. So if you wait till afterwards, it's going to be too late to really, in most cases, present in that feminine manner, because you're going to have man hands and a bunch of other stuff. Leah Thomas definitely looks like a dude. They're going to mention Fallon Fox. You grow up with that sort of development. You're very much a man, and you could take estrogen and it'll make you maybe not as strong, but you're still going to be stronger than most women because of how your body has set, because of your bone density, and all sorts of different things, your wingspan, and so that's why it's really, really unfair for you to go ahead and compete with women. But that's part of their appeal, that okay, well, I would like to be involved in these athletics, so I need to alter and stop my puberty so I can not develop in the way that a man would normally develop, and maybe I can develop in a way that's closer to how a woman would develop, so it's not unfair, and I can compete. So you don't have this big huge disadvantage with girls versus like Leah Thomas. So that's their argument for being able to do it young. So at some point, you're going to have to look inside yourself and say, what is actually immoral about this? And the answer is that people are living a freaking lie. It's just not true. If you're saying it's okay that your son, if he wants to cross dress, if he wants to grow out his hair, and you're cool with that, if he wants to change his name or something, that's a little weird, which would still, the changing the name would be to advance the lie or whatever, you know, your son could be a cross dresser, but saying, hey, yeah, cool, let's explore you being a woman if that's what you really want to do. You're feeding into that madness, just creates California. At some point, someone has to say, no, objective truth is important. Do what's cool for you is what leads to California. And Scott Wiener saying, don't tell us how to act when there's an outbreak of monkeypox. So you got to look inwardly in yourself. So yes, California is crazy, but how did it get there? How did it get to that point? Maybe with the help of different logic like that. Tell your son the truth. And in some cases, you got to be careful though, because there was a case where somebody, their daughter was exploring that, and they just kind of knew if they went hard with like, no, you can't do that, which that they apparently wouldn't have cared themselves. But they just knew their child and was like, no, they're not this way. But if they told them that they weren't, they were going to just double down because they were really stubborn. So they just let them like, okay, well, you can cut your hair and, wear your clothes how you want to wear your clothes, but we ain't got no money for like hormones and other stuff like that, which that may not work because Planned Parenthood will probably still hook you up. So beware of that route, parents. And eventually they just kind of grew out of it. But I wonder how many people, instead of just saying, hey, that's crazy, you're not a boy or you're not a girl, just trying to just take them through the Socratic method or something, just do some real critical thinking and saying, can you explain? I am a woman. I've been a woman my whole life, sweetheart. Can you explain to me why you feel that you are a woman? And try to break it down. And so you could say, at the end of the day, however you feel as an individual and how you want to express yourself, maybe, you're entitled to do that, especially when you're an adult. But if you're seeking to alter your body and alter your dress and your mannerisms to advance a stereotypical view of a woman, to enforce this idea that you are one because you feel like you're one, you cannot prove this. It's an idea. It's not a reality. So California's lost their mind. But they didn't do it alone. They didn't do it alone.
I just can't. It's madness. It's madness to me. I could go on and on and on, and it's madness. I don't know what's going on here.
You know, the only word that I've been able to come up with in thinking about it and thinking about it and reading about it and tweeting about it and saying, don't tweet that and all of it is evil. Maybe it depends on your belief system, right? But to me, there's no other explanation because it doesn't make sense. It's not good. It's not healthy. It's not.
I can tell
backed
you
up
that. I can tell you.
scientifically.
I actually have an answer for you. Hold on. Let me play this one out for you. Okay, so
Still saying, Sage saying it's evil. It is evil, and so was what Julian said before about like, hey, we can explore it. No, just be true. Seek truth, not self. Seek truth. All this all that's important is the self. Uplift the self. And I'm not saying that Julian is saying that, but back to that example that she get, like, it would be important to tell your child the truth and live by your true nature and not try to obstruct that and make everyone conform around and alter your body to just really drive in the lie. I've had some big videos about the subject of gender as of late, and people are like, why can't you just use the pronouns? Because I'm not gonna lie for you. That's so rude. That's so mean. That's so unkind. It's not kind to lie. I'm not lying for you or to you. Would you show some respect? I wouldn't want someone to lie to me. And then they get mad because people bring up, well, why do you guys call us cis? Because you are cis. Like, no, we're not cis because I don't identify as a woman. I am a woman. I don't believe in gender identity, that we have gender identities. That's a belief. And then someone was like, you're in a cult. I'm like, I'm in a cult because I don't accept gender identity. And they're like, it's not a belief. I'm like, okay, if it's not a belief, how do we observe it? What kind of test? If we put this through the scientific method, how will we be able to observe this and measure it and prove it? And their answer was, well, if Dylan Mulvaney is presenting as a woman and says that he's a woman, bam, that makes him a woman. I'm like, oh, so someone says something and we just take them blind faith at their word. That's your test. And, oh, you Christians are so mean and you're in a cult. It's crazy. Legitimately. And if people could just think about this, they could figure it out that it is crazy. But instead they want themselves to be crazy and everyone else to go along with it. It's the emperor has no clothes. Times a million. I'm gonna play a little bit more of this interview.
Here's the problem. I'm gay, so I get a card and I can say what I want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no. I have a letter in your acronym. So sit down. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
I'm allowed to say, this is batshit.
Mhm.
No. A straight person who might turn around and be like, that seems really crazy. Transphobe.
Oh, I'm a transphobe, according to Megan Rapinoe.
Okay.
Yes, she has literally called me that because of the transgender sports issue, which has science behind it. But because I said, let's say women's
Science
sports,
behind it.
then I'm a transphobe.
Sports
So go.
is biological.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful that way, by the way.
The thing of it is, you can transition. Absolutely. You can change your hormones 100%. But if you look at someone like Fallon Fox, for example, who was an MMA fighter, right? Since I believe has since retired or is currently retired. I don't believe Fallon Fox transitioned until well into adulthood and was literally cracking skulls. I know. I'm not exaggerating. So at the end of the day, when you have decades of androgenic hormones and you're biologically a man, you're going to have more muscle, improved bone density, better height, greater reach. There's a reason that it's like, oh, so-and-so just won the swimming thing. Oh, and the boxing thing. Oh, and the biking thing. Oh, and the powerlifting thing. I mean, again, and where people struggle is that it isn't fair, and we love black and white. It has to be
Yes.
all good or all bad. And it isn't fair to somebody. Somebody isn't going to win here. So the issue is trans athletes have nowhere to play because there's not enough of them to have a league, right? And then you've got the millions of women that can't compete. So someone's going to get screwed and no one knows what to do with it. And then if you say, okay, no, this isn't fair, you're transphobic. And that's how every conversation is systematically shut down. And you really also have to look at who's behind it and why.
Well, that's a very, very
Like, look
deep
at
issue.
the pharmaceutical industry
Correct.
and how much they're making on transitioning children.
Yeah.
And then they weaponize, I swear to God, and this is not, people love to say, oh, tin hat, Jillian claims, Jillian assumes. I do none of that. Do your own homework. I ask you to do your own homework, not to believe me, but to do your own homework. So they weaponize these civil rights groups like the HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, I think it is. And these guys will then go out and give you, what is it, a health equity and inclusion? I think it's like an HEI score, but don't quote me on the score, but you get a score, right? And if hospitals are willing to transition children to get behind it, then you get a low score. It's
The way
really
that they're
diabolical.
incentivizing people to say, yes, 12-year-old, go ahead and make this decision.
And if you don't,
yeah.
you then get labeled
Well,
and
and even the financial aspect, which, I mean, when I go back to
billions of dollars.
go back
billions.
to the COVID years, the beginning.
So yeah, we'll stop it there. But back to the Fallon Fox example that she gave, and men being taller and bigger, whatever. That's their justification for why they think that minors should have access to these drugs. And then they'll get the minors and different people saying that it's unfair to make them go through puberty and it's unjust to forcibly make them go through puberty. And you're just like, it's just life, it's just biology. Which I find those sort of historical conversations similar to people who are like, "You're forcing me to have a baby." I ain't got nothing to do with that. I can't pop one in you. I don't have that kind of equipment. It's just a biological process, bruh or ma'am. But yeah, so the issue isn't gonna go. You could say all day long, leave the kids alone, leave the kids alone. But the problem here is that they have their justification. And people like Leah Thomas will say, you respect me as a woman, you claim that, but then you don't want me to participate in your category, in your sport. So it seems like you don't actually accept me. And at some point, society has to say, yeah, that's correct, because you're a man. You are a man. So no, I don't accept you as a woman. And Julian is right. I've said many times, someone has to lose. It's going to be not everybody can win in this. But if it is more important to you to transition your body than to actually be able to play, then that's what's important to you. And if that means you can't be an athlete, then I guess that just means you can't be an athlete. Not a professional one, if that's the decision that you made to alter your body. That's just how it is. But we need to be honest with people and say, if you go this route, there are going to be people who do not accept you. People have no obligation to accept you. People have no obligation to use your fake name. People have no obligation to use your pronouns. And they have no obligation to let you into their sex segregated spaces, their spas, their um their locker rooms. None of it. Their prisons. You have to live as a sex that you are. And you have no right to enforce your internal struggles outwardly onto other people. And if people were honest, if that's what we as a society decided to treat this issue, and if we were honest to these people before they transition and say, no one is going to capitulate to you, and you still have to live as the way you don't want to present, maybe they wouldn't chop up their body. Maybe they wouldn't do it. So the issue here is a lack of honesty. So I respect a lot of the things that she said, but I can't get behind that. If my son wanted to, we explore it. I don't know much. Is that just trying to be PC? Because I guess different when you actually go in it. Because the book, Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, most of those people she talked to and interviewed were parents who were like left leaning and they're like pretty progressive or whatever, but their kids being trans all of a sudden was like a bridge too far. And they're like, this was never like them before. They went to college or got on Reddit or something, a Tumblr, and all of a sudden they want to be a boy. And all of a sudden now they're a bad parent and they're not, kind or good enough because they're concerned about their daughter wanting to get their breast chopped off. But it's funny how they kind of keep happening in these particular circles with particular ideologies. So anyway, interesting interview. You guys can go watch more if you like. That's where I'm gonna have to cut it off because we are over anyway. So hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate because it does cost to stream and run my website, all that good stuff. Thank you to Brian Michigan Pack for letting me use the studio. Good to be back in here. And you guys can also check out some of my books that's available on Amazon. There should be a link in the description that should actually take you to some of my books that you guys can pick up. And also check out different merch that's available at blacktnews.com, like the black tea mug and this, My Money, My Business t-shirt. So anyway, thank you guys. And just a reminder next week that I wonder if I should just take maybe I should just take the week off. Because I won't be available Monday probably. But on Thursday and Friday, I will be out of town. So I won't be streaming Thursday and Friday. So I'll let you guys know for sure tomorrow what I plan to do. But God bless you. And I'll see you tomorrow.